My name is Jeremy. Let me tell you something. Nothing is more devastating than realizing that the life you thought you had built was a lie. I've been working in construction for years to support my wife, Victoria, and our 3-year-old child. During my time at home, I noticed a change in Victoria's behavior whenever I had a day off or arrived home earlier than usual. Victoria always found an excuse to leave the house. It was different every time. Going grocery shopping, meeting friends, or running work errands. What struck me most was the sense of urgency. She'd grab her keys and rush out, as if the walls were closing in around her. At first, I attempted to rationalize it. She did freelance work, so rescheduling was flexible. Perhaps she preferred working outside the house. However, the more I paid attention, the less sense it made. She wasn't meeting clients. Most of her work was done remotely. There were no pressing deadlines that required her to be out so frequently. Even when she wasn't working, she always found an excuse to go out. The pattern became impossible to ignore. It made me wonder if she was restless when I was present. What was she doing while I wasn't? I began paying closer attention. Her quick trips would sometimes last for hours. I would ask her where she had been. Her responses were always vague, and if I asked twice, she became irritated, as if I was accusing her of something. That's when I realized something was wrong, and I had a feeling I wouldn't like what I discovered. Instead of making a big deal about it, I decided to put her to the test, because sometimes the best way to see someone's true nature is to give them the opportunity to reveal it. So one evening, I sat Victoria down and delivered what should have been devastating news. I told her I had lost my job, and that a bad investment had wiped out her savings. There is no backup plan or safety net. Nothing. Now, our savings were gone. They didn't even have an account with my name on it. But she didn't realize it. I was curious what my loving wife would do if the man who provided for her suddenly had nothing left to give. And let me tell you that her reaction was cold. She had no concern or hesitation. She simply looked at me and said, "What do you want me to do about it?" There were no words of encouragement. No. "We will figure this out together." I just sat there, stunned. She was not concerned about me. She was concerned about herself. She began mumbling about how difficult things would be for her and our 3-year-old child. There wasn't a single question about how I handled it. That was everything I needed to know. And that's when things changed. When she realized I was truly down, she stopped pretending entirely. She started speaking to me as if I were beneath her. I had suddenly lost all value in her eyes. She'd leave the house whenever she wanted, barely telling me where she was going, and return at odd hours with no explanation. And when she got home, it was as if I didn't exist. Unless she needed something for our 3-year-old. That was the only time she bothered to speak to me. Initially, I tested the waters. I told her that since I was out of work, we'd have to rely on the money she earned from her freelance work to handle certain household tasks. The expression on her face said everything. She did not like the idea. Not a bit. But what options did she have? I was broke, and she was my wife, correct? She sometimes brought money. She sometimes claimed she didn't have anything. But I knew it was a lie. She was still able to buy herself new clothes and get her hair done. And whenever she did contribute, it came at a cost. She would nag incessantly, making it clear that she resented every penny she spent. Any small thing would set her off. If the house was not immaculate, if our child was excessively playful, if I asked her a question at the wrong time, she'd lash out. It wasn't only directed at me. I noticed how she became irritated. Even with our child, small things that never bothered her before made her snap. It was as if simply contributing to our household expenses made her feel wronged. That was when I realized she never saw me as an equal partner in this marriage. In her opinion, my only value was how much I could provide. She thought I couldn't do it anymore. She lost all respect for me. So I played along. I led her to believe I was struggling. I did not fight back. I let her show me who she was when she thought I had nothing else to offer. Every day, she made it clearer. She never loved me. She only liked what I could give her. Months later, after all the cold treatment, late nights out, and dismissive looks she had given me, Victoria sat me down one evening and casually informed me that I was pregnant. She said I barely had time to process those words before she delivered a real dagger to my chest. "But it isn't yours." She said it as if it were nothing. She didn't even consider how I would react in her mind. She assumed I was so desperate to keep the family together that I would accept anything she threw at me. But she was mistaken. I just stared at her, letting the silence between us grow. I slowly smirked. "That is funny." She frowned. I'm not sure why I thought it was funny. That's when I reached into the drawer beside me, took out a plain white envelope, and tossed it on the table between us. "Open it," I replied, leaning back. She obeyed, sliding the papers out as soon as her gaze fell on the test results. Her whole demeanor changed. The color drained from her face, and her confidence cracked for the first time. This was the paternity test for our 3-year-old child. The results show that she isn't mine either. She stared at the paper, as if reading it again would alter the words written on it. I watched her mouth open and close, trying to find something to say. But what could she say? She'd been lying to me for years, and I only recently realized. I leaned forward. My voice was calm, almost amused. So let's get this straight. You thought you could tell me you were pregnant with another man's child, and expect me to accept it? Meanwhile, you've had me raising a kid who isn't even mine. She stammered, reaching for words, but I interrupted her. What's even funnier? I said this while standing up. I had already planned to leave in less than a week. I'll be heading overseas for a new construction project. My company is secure. Her head snapped up, and her eyes widened. What? What do you mean? I mean, I'm done with your BS. I was already making plans to leave before you confessed. I slipped my hands into my pockets and shrugged. You've just made things easier for me, because you've been unfaithful. However, being pregnant by another man provides the most compelling evidence. Panic spread across her face. Wait. What is happening to me? How about our child? She clutched the test results, as if they could change reality. I gave a small chuckle. Take a child to see his real father. You are an adult. You will figure things out for yourself. Her face fell as she realized, too late, that she had played herself in the worst possible way. The following morning, Victoria began her desperate attempt to undo the damage. She must have stayed awake all night contemplating how things had turned against her. She was already waiting when I stepped out of the bedroom. Her whole demeanor softened. The cold, distant wife I had endured for months was abruptly replaced by a woman eager to remind me of our long history together. She smiled at me, asked if I wanted coffee, and even attempted to reach for my hand gestures, which had been absent for some time. I was not surprised. I knew she was calculating. The moment I revealed my plans, her thoughts must have immediately turned to what she could do next. I'm sure she considered taking the legal route and extracting as much money from me as possible. But how long did she actually have to pull it off? Even if she wanted to take me to court, she'd have to find a lawyer who was willing to fight the battle. And that was not going to be inexpensive. Then there was the biggest issue for her. I was leaving the country. Who exactly was she going to play the game with? Even if she miraculously found a way to pursue me legally, what claim did she have? The kids were not mine. I had undeniable proof. There was no alimony to fight over because the evidence of her infidelity was overwhelming. How she had treated me. The way she abandoned the marriage the moment she realized I was broke. That would be enough for any judge to see straight through her. No, she possessed nothing. No leverage, no advantage, no safety net. So, at the time, begging and appealing to me was her best option. And she was smart enough to recognize it. At first, I said nothing. I simply observed because I already knew what it was. It was not regret. It was not love. It was fear. She was not worried about losing me. She was afraid of losing what I had provided. She understands that her new baby daddy has no plans to stay. So she returns to the man she has disrespected, lied to, and cheated on for years. And now she wanted to speak about us. After hearing that, I might be receiving some money. She reminisced about past vacations and nights spent discussing our future plans. I supported her through difficult times in her life. She admitted she made a mistake. She allowed stress and emotions to overcome her, that our family was worthy of saving. But I'd already seen through the act. If I had been unemployed and struggling as she thought I was, would you suddenly become affectionate while standing here? Of course not. She only cared now because she recognized I possessed something valuable. She did not want to miss out on this opportunity. She tried harder. She even burst into tears at one point, telling me she couldn't raise 2 kids on her own and needed my help. But the truth was that she only wanted my security, money, and stability, not me. She had already made her decision, and she was now going to live with it. I had no intention of giving Victoria the opportunity to make my departure difficult. She thought she had a week to persuade me to stay, to trick me with nostalgia and empty promises. However, my flight was only 2 days away. I had meticulously planned every last detail. Documents are secured, and tickets have been booked. Loose ends are tied up. I wasn't about to let her desperation keep me trapped in a life I no longer desired. The night before my flight, I moved silently while Victoria slept soundly, completely unaware of what was to come. I packed my bags. I had already taken the majority of his important belongings. Little by little over the last few days, there wasn't much left to collect. There are no goodbyes, last words, or final arguments. Just a quiet and deliberate exit. I took one final look at the house, which was meant to be a home but now felt like a prison. I was finally escaping. Then, without hesitation, I walked out the door, leaving behind a woman who had lied to me for years. The plane rumbled down the runway. The engines roared, the wheels lifted, and for the first time in months, I felt at peace. I'd been holding my breath for so long, pretending, enduring, and remaining silent. But now, as I watched the city shrink beneath me, I finally breathed slowly and steadily. I was free. Victoria had lied to me for many years. She'd humiliated me, disrespected me, and taken my presence for granted. For months, I had to play along, pretending I was broken. Like I had nowhere to go. Like I didn't have a future without her. But the truth was that she didn't have a future without me. And now it was her problem, not mine. I thought about her for a brief moment, but I had nothing left to feel. I wasn't sitting here imagining what she was doing, who she was calling, or how she would react to finding out I had left earlier than she expected. None of this mattered. She was capable of crying. She could beg. She could plot. I was already gone. I didn't hate her. I did not wish or cause harm. I honestly didn't care. And that was the true victory. Indifference. I leaned back in my seat and gazed at the sky. It is vast. The new world lies ahead of me. No luggage, no weight, dragging me down. It's just me moving forward. I wasn't simply leaving Victoria behind. I was leaving behind the version of myself who once believed that love required sacrificing dignity. That man was gone, and I didn't look back. I know there are men out there who are in the same situation as I was, feeling trapped in a marriage where they are nothing more than a paycheck and an afterthought. A man who only gets noticed when it's convenient. If this describes you, pay close attention. Do not argue. Do not beg. Don't waste your time trying to make her see your value. A woman who does not respect you cannot truly love you. And if she ever comes around, it won't be because she suddenly realized how valuable you are. It's because you recognize she's losing her security. The biggest mistake a man can make is to devote his entire life to a woman who is willing to replace him. The second time things get rough. Victoria's true colors emerged when she suspected I didn't have any money. That's when I learned my most important lesson. Love that only exists when you are useful is not love. It is a transaction. And once you see it for what it is, you don't feel the need to persuade her to stay. So, if you're in my position, stop trying. Instead, plan. Put your finances in order. Protect yourself. Move silently. And when the time comes, don't cause a scene. Just leave. No warnings, no emotional farewells. Because the moment you prove that you can live without her, she will suddenly want to fight for the marriage. But by then, it won't matter. You will already be gone. I didn't get my revenge. I did not need to. My freedom was the only victory I required. And, believe me, there's nothing better than knowing you walked away with your dignity. While she is left with nothing but regret. Here's the next story, the night it all started. I was not looking for trouble. Trouble found me anyway. Jessica was out as usual. Some corporate event downtown. She always claimed it was mandatory, but never provided any details. I stopped asking long ago. It was easier that way. I just settled into the couch. My phone buzzed while I was holding a beer in one hand and a remote in the other. A message from an unknown number. There are no words, only a picture. A hotel lobby with dim lighting and marble floors. At the center, Jessica. In a tight red dress that I had never seen before. Her arm was draped over a guy's shoulder. She was laughing. She tilted her head toward him. In a way, I recognized. That was how she used to look at me. I sat up so quickly that beer sloshed onto my jeans. My heart pounded. I blinked, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. That was an old photograph. That was a misunderstanding. But there was another message. She booked a room, 908. I thought you should know. Who the hell was this? I didn't even think. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door in minutes. As I sped toward the address shown in the photo, the city lights blurred past. A hotel is located just 20 minutes from our house. It did not make sense. Jessica was not dumb. If she was cheating, why was she so reckless? Why do it so close? And why would they send me proof? I parked across the street. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I looked up at the glowing windows. My stomach turned. A part of me is still hoping this is a joke, a prank, or anything other than the truth. When I walked in, the lobby was quiet, and the receptionist gave me barely a glance. I took the elevator up. My pulse was a steady roar in my ears. The door to the 9th floor slid open. Plush carpets. Soft lighting. A long hallway stretched out before me. Room 908. I stood there, staring at the golden numbers on the door. My breath is shallow. I wasn't sure if I expected to find a business meeting. A ridiculous, innocent explanation. Or proof that my wife was lying? I knocked. No response. Knocked again? Then footsteps. The door cracked open, revealing his face. A suit from the mid-40s that appears to be 10 times more expensive. The type of man who didn't have to check price tags. His hair was graying at the temples, but he exuded effortless confidence. He was the type of speaker who drew people in. His expression barely changed when he saw me. There is no guilt, no panic. It was only a mild irritation. As if I were a waiter bringing him the wrong beverage. "Can I help you?" His voice was calm and collected. I should have said something. I demanded to know who he was and what he was doing with my wife. But my gaze shifted past him into the room, and there she was, Jessica, standing by the bed in nothing but his dress shirt. Her hair was messy, and her lipstick was slightly smudged. She was not surprised to see me. Not even a little. She sighed and rolled her eyes. "Jesus, Ethan, what are you doing here?" I felt like I was in the wrong. As if I had embarrassed her. Something inside me broke. "Are you serious?" My voice came out hoarse. "I get a text telling me you've arrived, and this is your reaction." Jessica groaned and ran a hand through her hair. "Who has texted you? That is what you care about." She turned to face the man. "Give me a second." He did not argue. He simply stepped back, grabbing his jacket as if this were routine. As if he'd been through this before. As if I were just another husband knocking on the door. Jessica slipped into the hallway and shut the door behind her. She crossed her arms and didn't even pretend to be ashamed. "This is not how I wanted you to find out," she said, her voice flat. I gave out a bitter laugh. "Find out? You mean you weren't going to hide it forever?" She shrugged. "I was planning to tell you eventually." I stared at her, looking for traces of the woman I had married. The woman I fought and sacrificed for. But she was gone. Perhaps she had never been there at all. "How long?" I forced the words out. Jessica did not even hesitate. "Approximately a year." 1 year? A full year. I felt like an idiot. Worse, I felt disposable, as if I'd been a placeholder. Something she saved until something better came along. She then smiled. But it wasn't an apology smile. Not even a nervous one. Simply amused. "Ethan," she said, tilting her head and teasing me. "Did you really believe you were enough?" I should have walked away. I should have let her have the final say, and left her standing in the hallway of that overpriced hotel. But I wasn't finished yet. Because whoever sent me that text, whoever wanted me to see it, wasn't with her. That meant Jessica had a secret. She was not prepared for me to find out. I did not respond to her. I just stood there staring at her, letting the silence between us stretch. And for the first time that night, something changed in her expression. The amusement faded, replaced by a sharper annoyance. Jessica was constantly in control. Always a step ahead. She had already prepared for my discovery that she had the perfect lines, practicing the fake guilt and bored indifference. But she had not prepared for me, and I did not react as she had expected. "Are you simply going to stand there?" she inquired, her tone clipped. "Or are you going to say something dramatic so I can get on with my night?" I felt something cold settle into my chest. She didn't care. She didn't even pretend to care. "You should be worried," I replied quietly. Jessica scoffed. "What is this about? You are crying in the parking lot. Please, Ethan, do not be pathetic." I shook my head, wondering who sent me the text that made her pause. It was fleeting, barely a flicker, but I captured it. Her jaw tightened momentarily. Her stance shifted. She had not expected that. "Who sent it?" I pressed because I do not believe it was out of kindness. "Somebody wanted me to see this. Someone who doesn't really like you." Jessica parted her lips, but did not speak. She knew something. And whatever it was, she wasn't ready to tell me. I took a step forward and lowered my voice. "How bad is it, Jessica?" She blinked. For the first time that night. She appeared uncomfortable. I nearly laughed. She was half naked in a hotel hallway with another man, which made her nervous. "Stay out of it, Ethan," she said finally. "It is none of your business." I tilted my head. "You made it my business after you spent a year lying to me." Jessica exhaled sharply, rolling her eyes, but I could see tension creeping into her shoulders. She wanted to return to that room. She wanted to pretend the conversation had never occurred. But I wasn't letting her off so easily. "Who is he?" I asked. She shot me a look. "Do you really want to know?" I crossed my arms. She sighed heavily, as if I was bothering her. "His name is David. He's my boss." I laughed briefly and without humor. Of course he is, David. The man she had spent months gushing over. The brilliant strategist, the visionary. The person who saved the company last quarter. The pieces clicked into place so quickly that I felt sick. "You received a promotion 6 months ago." I spoke slowly. "Let me guess. You didn't really earn it, did you?" Jessica curled her lips into a smirk. She did not even deny it. Ethan, you're acting as if this is a grand conspiracy. It is not. I simply seized an opportunity when it presented itself. An opportunity? I repeated, my voice hollow. Is that what you call this? She shrugged. What would you like me to say? That I am sorry. I am not. I've spent years carrying you, years of waiting for you to mature into someone worthy of respect. But you never did. I clenched my jaw. So you've decided to trade up? Jessica smiled. I traded ahead. And, frankly, Ethan, you should be grateful. I provided you with a comfortable life for as long as I could stand it. I could have left you with nothing. Nothing? That word rang in my head. Nothing. There was something wrong with this conversation, something larger than the affair. And then it struck me. Wait, I said. Why would you be able to leave me without anything? Jessica's eyes flickered just for a second. But it was sufficient. There it was. The real secret. I took a step closer and lowered my voice. What have you done, Jessica? She turned away. I do not have time for this. I grabbed her wrists. Not hard. Just enough to get her to look at me. Tell me. Jessica exhaled through her nose, as if she were already bored with the conversation. Then she yanked her arm away, straightened her shoulders, and gave me the coldest smile I'd ever seen. You will find out soon enough. With that, she walked back into the hotel room and closed the door in my face. I did not leave right away. I stood there looking at the closed door. My mind raced. Jessica had won the round. At least that's what she believed. She had expected me to lose it, yell, and cause a scene. Instead, I'd given her something worse. I had rattled her, and that meant there was more to it. I turned and walked back down the hall, convincing myself that I wasn't just a betrayed husband anymore. I was a man with an issue to solve. And the main question was not why Jessica had cheated. It explains why she smirked when she told me I'd have nothing. She'd done something. I took the elevator back down. My pulse was still thudding in my ears as I walked into the lobby. My phone vibrated again. Another unknown number. Good. You now see her for who she is. I scanned the room, my gaze darting between the guests, the staff, and anyone who might be watching me. Who the hell is texting me? I typed back quickly. Who are you? 3 dots appeared and then disappeared. Then nothing. I clenched my jaw. Whoever it was, they weren't finished with me yet. I stepped outside, and the night air hit me like a slap. My hands shook, but not with sadness. No, it had burned out the second time. Jessica smiled at me and said she'd been carrying me for years. This was not heartbreak. It was outrage. I sat in my car, gripping the wheel and forcing myself to think. Jessica was confident. Too confident. She wasn't simply cheating. She was plotting something. And I didn't know what it was. I needed leverage, and there was only one place to begin. Jessica's office. I pulled into her firm's parking lot 20 minutes later. The building was dark. The glass windows reflect the city skyline. I'd been here a few times before, mostly for her corporate events, which she barely tolerated having me attend. I got out and went to the front doors. Peering inside. Locked. Of course. But I was not looking to go inside. I was looking for someone to answer questions. I took out my phone and scrolled through my contacts to find the one I needed. Then Carter. Then there was one of Jessica's coworkers who was lower on the totem pole but still sharp. A guy who listened more than he spoke. And most importantly, a guy who enjoyed drinking. I called, and he answered on the second ring, his voice groggy. Ethan? Man, it's nearly midnight. Ben, I need a favor. There was a pause and then a sigh. Is this about Jessica? I tightened my grip on the phone. Did you know? Another pause, then softening. Everybody knew. I exhaled slowly. I don't have time to be mad about it right now. I need to know what she is up to. Ben hesitated. Man, I do not. You owe me. I cut in. Remember last year, when you called me from jail because you were too drunk to drive? Silence. Then a dejected sigh. What would you like to know? I turned and leaned against my car. Focus on the office building. She said that if she left me, I would have nothing. Why? Then it went quiet. Then I gave another sigh. I don't know the specifics. Okay. But I know she's been transferring money. I went still. What do you mean? I mean, for months, she's been meeting with higher-ups behind closed doors. She's rewriting contracts and shifting investments that are way above my pay grade. But I've heard something. Everything about liquidating assets and moving accounts offshore. My stomach twisted. Do you think she is stealing? Then paused. I believe she's preparing for something. And if she told you you weren't getting anything, then, yeah, man, she's probably already moved whatever was under your name. I closed my eyes. Jesus Christ. This was more than just an affair. Jessica wasn't simply leaving me. She was ruining my finances before she walked out the door. I swallowed and forced my voice to remain calm. Does she know? Do you know? Then he laughed without humor. She does not care. Who knows? She believes she is untouchable. Of course, she did. That was Jessica's entire personality. She was consistently the smartest person in the room. But not this time. This time, someone had warned me before it was too late. I had no proof yet, but I had something equally important. I had a head start. I thanked Ben before hanging up. My mind raced. If Jessica had already begun transferring assets, I was running out of time. I needed to figure out where the money was going, what accounts were in my name, and what she had already taken. There was only one person who could tell me exactly that. My lawyer. I got into my car and drove through the city, the lights blurring past. Jessica thought she had me cornered, and had already won. She had no idea I was about to rip her entire plan apart. The moment I walked into my lawyer's office the next morning, I knew I hadn't overreacted. Mark Grayson had been my family's attorney for many years, handling my parents' estate, our wills, and everything. He was a no-nonsense guy in his late 50s who always wore a sharp navy suit. But today, when he saw me, he seemed concerned. "Sit," he said, closing the door behind us. I said he did not. Mark ran his hand through his graying hair, exhaled sharply, and fixed me with an unappealing expression. "Ethan, do you have any idea what is going on right now?" The fact that he was asking me rather than telling me meant that I was already in serious trouble. I clenched my fist. Jessica is stealing from me, isn't she? Mark's expression hardly changed. That explained everything I needed to know. I leaned forward. "Tell me what she has done." Mark sighed and pulled a folder from his desk. He slid it towards me. "I have been trying to reach you for weeks. Jessica asked me to draft some paperwork. I said you approved it." I froze. "What paperwork?" Mark tapped the folder signatures to transfer all joint assets to her name. My skin got cold. "That is impossible." "I've never signed anything." Mark nodded grimly. "I understand, which means she forged your signature." I looked at the folder as if it might bite me. My mind was reeling as I tried to understand what this meant. Jessica had spent the previous year preparing for this while I was working late. While I tried to be a good husband and trusted her, she was preparing me to lose everything. The house, the finances, the investments. She had planned it. Mark continued, his voice low and cautious. "If we act quickly, we can get ahead of this. I can contest the transfers. File a fraud claim. But Ethan." He paused. I looked up, jaw tightened. "What?" Mark exhaled. "She's intelligent. If she's been doing this for months, she's likely already hidden the majority of the money. It's not just about your assets. She's been restructuring everything, transferring funds, and changing ownership. By the time we get to court, she might not have anything left in her name for us to claim." My pulse pounded in my ears. "Then we find out where she kept it." Mark nodded slowly. "You need proof. Something undeniable. If you can get that, we'll bury her in court." "Proof?" I gritted my teeth. Jessica has always been meticulous. She refused to leave a paper trail where I could find it. But there was one place where she could have slipped her personal laptop. Jessica never allowed me near it. Said it contained sensitive work documents. But what if she had been moving money, forging documents, and planning the entire thing? The laptop was the key. Mark observed my expression. "What are your thoughts?" I stood up. "I think I need to go home." Jessica was about to wish she had not underestimated me. I drove home quickly, gripping the wheel as if it were the only thing keeping me steady. Jessica would not return until late, if she came home at all. That gave me a couple of hours. When I arrived at the house, everything looked the same, as if nothing had changed. As if I wasn't standing in a house that was no longer mine. I walked in and closed the door quietly behind me. The place was spotless, as usual. Jessica found everything perfect. Everything's under control. Unfortunately, she was about to lose it. I went directly to the office. The door was locked. That was new. I knew she was hiding something. I didn't have a key, and I didn't need one. Years ago, I replaced one of the door hinges myself but never fully screwed it back in. It was loose enough to allow me to force the door open with minimal effort. I jammed a credit card between the frames and wiggled it until it clicked. The door swings open. Jessica's desk was immaculate, as one would expect. But I was not here for the desk. I came here for the laptop. It sat there. Closed. Sleek. Expensive. Unlocked. "Jessica, you're an arrogant idiot." I sat down and flipped it open. The screen lit up, revealing a spreadsheet. My stomach turned as I skimmed the numbers. She'd already drained. The majority of our accounts moved money. Offshore investments were sold, and properties were liquidated. Then I saw it. A document titled Will Revisions Final. I clicked on it. My father's will, written in black and white, was my worst nightmare. My father left me everything. Millions of assets, properties, and stocks. But Jessica had tampered with it. There were revisions marked up, changes pending, and forged signatures. Jessica had planned to steal my inheritance. My vision blurred with rage. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream, throw the laptop across the room, or break something to make this less real. But I couldn't, because I had everything I needed. Jessica had become greedy. She'd left a paper trail. I grabbed my phone and began taking photos of everything. Spreadsheets, wills, and offshore account numbers. Everything she'd done. I then took out a USB drive from my drawer and copied the files. It would be pointless for her to attempt to erase them. I had backups now. By the end, my hands had returned to normal. I wasn't powerless anymore. Jessica believed she had buried me. She had no idea I'd dug her grave instead. I sat there, staring at the stolen money and forged documents, proof of Jessica's complete betrayal. And for the first time since the beginning, I didn't feel sick. I did not feel heartbroken. I felt prepared. Jessica had spent a year playing her little game, moving in secret, believing I was too stupid to notice. She had drained our accounts, changed my father's will, and set herself up to walk away richer than she deserved. But she'd made a mistake. She assumed she had time. She assumed I wouldn't fight back. She thought I had already been beaten. She had no idea what was waiting for her. I closed the laptop, put the USB drive in my pocket, and walked out of the office. Nothing was left for me here. Not the house, not in the memories, not her. I had work to do. When I returned to Mark's office, he was already waiting. I tossed the USB onto his desk, and he raised his eyebrows as he picked it up. Everything is on there, I explained. Offshore accounts, transfers, and forged wills. You mentioned we needed proof. We got it. Mark plugged it in and scrolled through the files. His expression darkened with each click. Jesus and Ethan. Here it is. This is not good for her. I replied coldly. Not for me. Mark sat back and rubbed his temples. You understand what this means, right? She did not simply move money. She committed several felonies: forgery, fraud, and theft. This is no longer just a divorce case. If we move forward with this, Jessica could be facing prison time. I met his gaze. Good. Mark let out a slow breath. All right. First, we freeze the accounts. Legally, you can still contest the transfers, especially given this evidence. We issue emergency orders and secure everything before she moves the rest. Do it. I replied immediately. He nodded. Next, we bring in a forensic accountant. We'll track every dollar she's taken. If she thought she was hiding her tracks, she's about to get a rude surprise. I nearly smiled. Jessica had always been intelligent, but she was not smarter than the law. Mark had already begun making calls, his voice sharp and precise, in full lawyer mode. I leaned back, my pulse stable for the first time in days. It was my turn to play the game. That night, I waited. Jessica hadn't returned home the night before, so she was probably still with David. Fine. Allow her to enjoy it. Because when she does walk through that door, I want it to be there waiting. I wanted to see her expression as she realized her world was about to collapse. It was almost midnight when I heard her car pull up. I did not move. I sat in the living room, lights turned off, allowing the silence to surround me. The door opened, and there she was. Jessica. Hair is perfect, makeup, flawless. As if she hadn't spent the previous 24 hours destroying my life. She barely looked at me as she walked in and tossed her bag on the counter. Wow, she commented dryly. Are you really still here? I did not respond. She sighed and ran a hand through her hair. Look, Ethan, I don't have the energy for whatever speech you've been practicing. Can we just? You stole from me. Jessica froze. Slowly, she turned to face me. What? I stood up. Calm. Controlled. Unshaken. You have heard me, I said. You stole my inheritance. You forged my signature. You emptied our accounts and attempted to cut me out of everything. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Jessica's expression barely changed. But I saw it. That small, split-second hesitation. She knew. And she knew she had been apprehended. I don't know what you're talking about. She spoke smoothly. I nearly laughed. She was still attempting to lie. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. The USB was plugged in, and the files were open. I turned it toward her, letting her see everything. Bank statements, transfers, and wills. Jessica's face went blank, and for the first time, she was speechless. I let the silence stretch, allowing her to process what was going on. Then I moved closer. Slow, Deliberate. You assumed you were untouchable. I spoke softly. You assumed you could walk away and leave me with nothing. But, Jessica, you forgot one thing. She swallowed. What? I smiled coldly, sharply. Final. I fight back. Her mask cracked slightly, and I noticed it for the first time in our entire relationship. Jessica was scared of me. Jessica was not used to losing. She had spent months, perhaps years, putting this together piece by piece. The strategy is a game. She thought she had already won before I realized I was playing. But I had flipped the board, and she had nowhere to go. For the first time since I met her, she appeared scared. She attempted to hide it, of course. Jessica was good at it. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and made her expression cold and unreadable. But her fingers twitched at her sides. Her breathing seemed a little too controlled. I could see her mind working and calculating. Okay, she said finally, her voice measured. You found some documents, and I let out a low laugh while shaking my head. You really don't understand, do you? Jessica exhaled and tilted her head as if I were being ridiculous. Let me guess. You ran crying to Mark, had him look through my finances. And now you think you're a genius because you discovered a few transfers? Ethan, this is not a crime. Married couples share their finances. If I moved money, it remained money. I had every right to relocate. God, she was still trying. Still pretending it wasn't happening. I leaned in just enough to see her flinch. Tell me, Jess, does married couples financial sharing include forging your husband's signature? Because, last I checked, that was called fraud. Her jaw tightened, but she did not deny it. I kept going. My voice is quiet, steady, deadly. So what about my father's will? I said. Did I also share that with you? Or was it simply another asset for you to steal? Jessica blinked only once, but that was enough. I witnessed the moment she realized how badly she had messed up. She was so sure I wouldn't figure it out until it was too late that by the time I saw what she had done, she'd already left. Sitting pretty in an expensive penthouse. I paid with my inheritance. But now she was apprehended. She swallowed, straightened, and changed tactics. Her lips parted slightly, and her eyes became softer, regretful. Ethan, please listen. I know how it looks, but I swear I didn't mean to hurt you. I needed security. You need to understand. I laughed out loud, uncontrollably. Jessica actually took a step back for security. I repeated, shaking my head. You have been lying to me for a year. You have been stealing from me, cheating on me, and rewriting my father's will. And now you're standing there acting like a helpless victim. Her mask cracked further. I noticed a flash of panic before she controlled it. Fine. She snapped. Do you want the truth? I took what I deserved. Jessica crossed her arms as I stilled her. Her eyes were dark and sharp again. The real Jessica. The one who wasn't afraid to show me who she truly was. I created this life, she said, her voice low and firm. I shaped and pushed you. You would not be where you are today without me. And I only asked for security. You should thank me, Ethan. I exhaled slowly and shook my head. Do you actually believe that? She smiled. Smug. Condescending. I don't simply believe it. She muttered. I know it. I nodded. Good. Jessica frowned. Good. I smiled. Yeah, because that means you won't see it coming. Before she could react, I reached for my phone, touched the screen, and pressed play. Jessica's voice filled the entire room. Fine. Do you want the truth? I took what I deserved. Jessica stood still, her own words crystal clear, and recorded in perfect quality. She jerked her head up, her eyes wide. You. I picked up the phone, wagging it slightly. Oh, come on, Jess. Do you think I would come here unprepared? Do you think I would confront you without proof? Jessica's mouth opened, and then closed. Trapped, she clenched her fists at her sides. Did you set me up? No, I replied softly. I gave you an opportunity to tell the truth. You chose to confess instead. That's your responsibility. I noticed her face change. Panic calculations. Desperation. She'd lost control over the situation. Jessica hated losing control. She inhaled sharply. Ethan, please listen. We don't need to do this. Do you have the money right now? Fine. I will walk away. There is no drama and no lawyers. Just. Let us be civil about this. I tilted my head. You intended to leave me with nothing. Her jaw tightened. So, now I'm not. So let's just. You don't get to choose how this ends. I cut in. Jessica stiffened. I stepped forward. Did you think you could erase me? That you could change my life, steal from me, betray me, and then walk away like nothing happened? But, Jessica, you forgot something. She swallowed. What? I smiled. I have nothing more to lose. Jessica appeared terrified for the first time since we met. That's when my phone vibrated. I glanced down at a text from Mark. Bank accounts are frozen. A fraud claim was filed. It is over. I let out a slow breath. It was the first real breath I'd taken in months. I looked back up at Jessica. You might want to check your bank account. Her face had lost its color. She fumbled for her phone and unlocked it with shaky hands, scrolling quickly. Then she froze. I saw it. The exact moment she realized everything had vanished. Her whole plan, all of it was destroyed. I did not move. I did not gloat. I just stood there, letting her sit in the wreckage she had caused. Jessica had won until she lost. Jessica's hand was shaking, not dramatically. I just noticed when she lowered her phone. Her face was unreadable, but I could see it. She realized she'd lost more than just her bank accounts. It wasn't just the fraudulent claim. It was everything. She had spent months, if not years, perfecting her escape, planning every step and move to ensure her victory. And in the course of one night, I had ripped it all away from her. She inhaled slowly, steadied herself, and tried to regain control. I could practically hear her mind racing through every possible scenario. All right, she finally said with a smooth voice. Controlled. She put her phone away and squared her shoulders. I underestimated you. That almost had me laughing. The understatement of the century. She ignored it. However, you should think carefully about what comes next. I tilted my head in amusement. Is this a threat? Jessica exhaled through her nose and shook her head. No, this is a warning. You think you have won. But let me ask you a question. How do you think this will look in court? I frowned. What? Her lips curled slightly. Let's assume this goes to trial. Fraud. Forgery. All these lovely little charges. Do you know what comes next? I didn't respond. She moved closer. They are going to drag you through the mud. They are going to question everything. Our finances, our marriage, and your mental health. Do you really want your entire life displayed like that? I clenched my jaw. She kept going, her voice soft and almost sympathetic. Think about your job, Ethan, your reputation, your father's name. You really want to be the guy who let his wife screw him over so badly that the entire city finds out. I stared at her. You're unbelievable. Jessica shrugged. I am practical. And that is what I am offering you as a practical solution. We walk away from it. No lawsuits, no police, and no scandal. I will sign whatever you want. I let you keep what's left, and we'll move on. No one needs to know what happened. I examined her face, calculated, perfectly composed. She was not begging. She wasn't sorry. She was negotiating. Because that is what Jessica has always done. Even now, with her back against the wall and her entire world collapsing around her, she attempted to control the narrative. I should have expected it. Given that Jessica never planned for failure, she simply rewrote the rules until she won. Exhaled slowly. Are you afraid? Jessica scoffed. Of what? You smiled. Of losing. Everyone knows what you are. That is why you prefer to keep this quiet. Because if this goes to trial, you'll be ruined. Your name and career are both gone. Her eyes flashed. What do you think happens to you? I shrugged. I rebuild. I start over. You? Jessica, you won't get a second chance after this. There is no going back from what you have done. For the first time, she hesitated for a split second. Then something changed. She laughed softly at first. I stiffened as the volume increased. What's so funny? Jessica wiped the corner of her eye and shook her head. Do you really think this is over? My stomach turned. Jessica smiled. Slow. Sharp. Dangerous. Oh, Ethan. She muttered. You have no idea what happens next. I stared at her, waiting. And then she dealt the final blow. Do you really think I did this alone? For a moment, the room seemed too small. I focused on Jessica, the satisfied tilt of her lips, and the way she looked at me. Not like a woman who had lost, but like someone who had anticipated this moment. You're not telling the truth, I said with a flat voice. She gave a soft, amused sigh. Ethan, do you really think I'd still be standing here if you had beaten me? Do you think I would be so calm? I clenched my fist. What are you saying? She took a slow step forward, lowering her voice as if she were revealing a secret. I was not working alone. I've never been. And you? You were so focused on me that you didn't even consider who else could be involved. A slow, creeping dread settled into my chest. Jessica tilted her head as she watched the realization dawn on my face. There it is, she muttered. You are finally getting it. I inhaled sharply. Who? Jessica gave me a pitiful look. Oh, Ethan, do I need to spell it out for you? I did not want to. I did not want to believe it. But the moment she said it, I recognized Mark. Jessica's smile widened, and everything made sense. The delays, the ambiguous responses, the fact that Mark wasn't as surprised as he should have been when I approached him. Jessica had been moving assets for months, and he had no idea I had asked for help. I had given him everything, and he had spent the entire time playing for the opposing team. I forced my breathing to be even. How long? Jessica tapped her nails against the counter. Slow, deliberate. I have always swallowed my father's will. Mark handled the paperwork. She spoke smoothly. Who do you think granted me access? Who do you believe helped make the revisions appear legitimate? I closed my eyes for a half second. Jesus Christ, I had been so blind. Jessica moved even closer. I got close enough to smell her perfume. The same one that had clung to her after all those late-night work sessions. I told you, Ethan, she whispered. You don't know what you're up against. I forced myself to meet her eyes. So, what happens now? She smiled. Now you're walking away. Take what's left. Move on and forget about this entire situation. I gave out a hollow laugh. What if I don't? Jessica's expression did not change. Then you'll find out how bad things can get for you. I should have been afraid, but I was not. Because in that moment, I looked at the woman who had spent a year destroying me, and the wife who had never truly loved me. Something within me clicked. Jessica was still convinced she was winning. She still believed she was untouchable. And that was her final mistake. Because I stopped playing defense. I planned to burn down her entire empire. Jessica stood there completely at ease, convinced she still had control, and I allowed her to believe it. I let her savor this moment, pretending she had backed me into a corner and was about to fold, because it was the last moment of peace she would ever have. I took a slow breath and nodded, as if considering it. Okay, I murmured. You win. Jessica's lips parted slightly, not surprised but pleased. She was already expecting me to break. She was incredibly arrogant. She reaches for her bag. A wise decision. I watched her. One final question. She sighed and tapped her manicured nails on the strap. Ethan, why did you ask someone to send me the hotel photos? Jessica became completely still. It was a quick, half-second reaction, but I noticed it. She had not expected me to ask that. She had not expected me to connect the dots. That was it. That was the last confirmation I needed. I took a step forward and lowered my voice. You asked me to find out about David. Jessica's expression did not change. Why should I do that? You tell me. I said this while closely watching her. I was supposed to be surprised, right? You were about to leave me with nothing. Drain the accounts. Take my inheritance. So, why the hell would you tell me about the affair? Why warn me? Jessica exhaled slowly, but she was no longer bored. Now she was calculating. Didn't you plan that part? I spoke softly. Someone else did. And that means someone else is playing the game, and they are not on your side. Jessica's jaw tightened, and I realized she wasn't untouchable. She had enemies, and whoever sent me that text wanted her downfall. I smiled, slow but sharp. It appears that you are not in as much control as you thought. Jessica's mask broke. Just a second. Then her phone vibrated. She yanked it from her bag, glancing briefly at the screen before cursing under her breath. I stepped forward. What is wrong? Jess? She ignored me and turned toward the door. I need to go. I blocked her path. Why? Jessica had never panicked, but she now looked as if someone had ripped the ground out from under her. She pushed past me. Stay out of this, Ethan. I let her go because I did not have to stop her. I had everything I needed. Jessica was in free fall now, and I was going to sit back and watch her crash. Jessica slammed the door behind her, her heels clicking against the pavement as she stormed towards her car. She wasn't running away from me. No, that was not her style. She was fleeing from whoever was pulling the strings behind her back. That told me one thing. Jessica was in trouble. Good. I waited a few seconds and then followed, not in my car, as she would expect. Instead, I tried a different approach. I called for a ride. I kept my distance. Allow her to think. She'd shaken me off. However, Jessica had always been predictable when she was panicked. When things started to go wrong, she became a control freak. She did not improvise. She returned to her safe place. So I knew where she was going before she even arrived. I watched her drive up to David's house from across the street, which had a sleek glass wall. My money most likely contributed to the purchase of this house. The front door opened before she could knock on David's door. He had changed into a more casual outfit. No polished suit. Just an unbuttoned dress shirt at the collar. He looked at her. I couldn't hear what she said, but I could see how upset she was with him. She was unraveling. I pulled out my phone and began recording. It wasn't just about vengeance anymore. This was about winning. Jessica pushed past David and disappeared inside. I waited for the door to close behind them before slipping across the street. The side of the house featured floor-to-ceiling windows. Excellent design choice. Terrible for privacy. I moved along the edge, staying low, until I had a clear view inside. Jessica yelled. David was standing by the bar, arms crossed and face unreadable. But I recognized that look. That wasn't a concern. That was not guilt. That man had already moved on. Jessica's voice rose, indicating that she realized it as well. She gestured wildly and stepped closer to him. Her face twisted with frustration. David sighed and rubbed his temples. Then he said something that caused Jessica to freeze. Her hands dropped. Her shoulders stiffened. And for the first time in the entire mess, she appeared terrified. I turned up the volume on my phone, hoping to hear what he was saying. Finally, I did. David's tone was calm to calm. You thought you were the only person moving money? Jessica's head snapped upward. What? David sighed again, as if he was tired of her. Come on, Jess. You think I hadn't noticed? You weren't very discreet. Jessica stepped back. That was not your money. David gave her a look, didn't he? And then it struck me. Jessica believed she was the mastermind. But, David, he'd been playing the same game and had just checkmated her. Jessica reached inside her bag. Perhaps for her phone, or for one last desperate move. But David simply shook his head. It's over, he announced. I took everything I needed. You're a liability now. Jessica's breath tightened. David. He cut her off. Leave. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered how she smiled in the hotel hallway. She had looked me in the eyes and told me that I wasn't enough. Now she was nothing. She stood there for a few moments, shaking. She then turned on her heels and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I watched her get into her car, gripping the steering wheel so hard that her knuckles turned white. I wondered what she was thinking. Maybe she'd lost everything. Perhaps she had never really had control at all. I exhaled slowly and stopped recording because that was it. The final piece. Jessica wasn't simply a cheater. She wasn't simply a liar. She was a woman who had burned every bridge, duped the wrong people, and now had no one left to help her. And I had it all taped. I did not follow her. I did not need to. Instead, I walked away. My phone feels warm in my hand. My mind was already racing with what would happen next. Tomorrow, I'd send the recording to my lawyer. Tomorrow, I'd make certain Jessica's name was dragged through every courtroom in the state tomorrow. I'd leave her with nothing. But tonight, I simply wanted to enjoy the moment. Because, after everything she had done, Jessica had finally lost her power.